Welcome to our viewers on BBC One. We are watching in our screens here the taxi that is carrying Andy Burnham from London Euston to Westminster, where he will be sworn in just under an hour's time as the new MP for Makerfield. But the big question is, what does he become after that? Having confirmed that he will stand for the Labour leadership on his train journey here this afternoon, he will be sworn in with lots of Labour MPs looking on, and perhaps they will treat him this afternoon as the conquering hero. And I say that because the man who we thought was going to run against Andy Burnham, the former Health Secretary Wes Streeting, has confirmed that he will back Andy Burnham for Labour leader, removing perhaps the strongest potential challenger to him. In a letter posted to social media, the former Health Secretary said, "We could spend the summer exaggerating small differences, or we can roll up our sleeves and help him to deliver the change our party and our country needs." That is the choice that I am making, and I hope that everyone else will back Andy too. We have just had a brief statement from Andy Burnham as he left Euston Station just a short time ago, in which he thanked the Prime Minister for his service and paid tribute to him, and also thanking the voters in Greater Manchester, paying some brief comments to the job that he has left behind. He emptied his office in Greater Manchester this afternoon, and he now heads to Downing Street, perhaps, or certainly to Westminster, thinking about what sort of plan he's going to set out in the days and the weeks ahead. Earlier, an emotional Keir Starmer said he will be resigning as Prime Minister and as leader of the Labour Party. And from the lectern here in Downing Street, he said that every decision he'd made in office had been about putting the country first. He did set out a timetable for those who would want to replace him, starting, he said, on July the 9th and ending by the summer recess, to ensure that a new leader was in place when Parliament returns in September. But maybe that contest will be truncated by some of the statements we've had this morning. Let's look back then on the statement we had from Sir Keir Starmer here on the steps of Number 10.
Walking up this street 2 years ago was the proudest moment of my life. A new Labour government, the first in 14 years. A page in our country's history turned after years of disappointment and despair. The chance to change the lives of millions of people for the better. That's what I came into politics for. The journey to that point was not easy. 6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt. I was told time and time again that my party was finished, that we were consigned to history, that a majority at the general election, let alone a landslide majority, was impossible. But we proved those people wrong, because we changed our party, ripping out the poison of anti-Semitism, restoring trust on the economy, defence and national security, and becoming a party that once again stood proudly with, not against, our national flag. The hard work of change was with a singular purpose, not power for power's sake, but to change Britain for the better. To build a fairer country with dignity and respect, where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, wealth and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few. And look at what we've achieved in just 2 years. An economy that is stronger, growing faster than our peers, wages rising faster than inflation in every single month since we came to power, investment secured, infrastructure being built, an end to austerity, with the fastest fall in NHS waiting lists for 17 years, the biggest improvement in rights for workers and renters in a generation, the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War. Small boat crossings falling, asylum hotels closing, protecting young people from social media, and 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty because of the choices that I made. Our reputation in the world restored, with Britain once again standing up for decency, respect, and the rule of law, securing trade deals, standing with Ukraine, standing up for our values, and rebuilding our relationship with our allies in Europe. Change promised by a Labour government, change fought for by a Labour government, change delivered by a Labour government. But I know the question being asked now is not who was best placed to change the Labour Party, to take us into power and to begin the vital work of improving lives for millions of people. Those questions have been answered. The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power. I will also give my successor my full and unequivocal support, knowing that they will inherit a Britain that is far stronger and fairer than the one I inherited 2 years ago, better prepared for the challenges ahead, and better able to ensure the Labour Party secures a second term in office. I want to thank all of those friends and colleagues who have been at my side for these past 6 years or so, for their incredible commitment, service and support. I want to thank the brilliant Number 10 staff and our country's extraordinary civil service who dedicate their lives to public service. And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister issuing his statement to the country this morning before he went across the street to join his wife Vic, who he has been speaking to at great length this weekend in his country residence of Chequers, coming to the decision that he had lost the confidence of his party and the MPs and perhaps also his cabinet, and announcing that he will not run in the contest for the leadership. The path then clear for Andy Burnham, who has just arrived in London. You may be able to hear the helicopters overhead. There is a convoy making its way to the Palace of Westminster, where Andy Burnham is due to be sworn in just under half an hour's time. He did, though, speak to our reporter Sam Harrison as he got off the train in Euston. Have a listen.
I made my statement, obviously praising the Prime Minister's dedication, service, and confirm that I will put myself forward in the process that will soon be underway.
When Rishi Sunak did that and he became Prime Minister, you called for a general election. Would you be looking to do the same?
I think you're jumping several hurdles ahead there. My priority today is to becomes sworn in as the mayor, as the MP for Makerfield, and it's been very kind of sad for me today to leave Greater Manchester. The people have been brilliant to me over the last few years. I've loved every minute of the role. I hope I leave Manchester in a better place, but thanks very much. Thank you.
The so-called King of the North arriving in the south to what looks at the moment to be a coronation. Our chief political correspondent Harry Farley is with me here in Downing Street. What a morning, what a morning. And quintessentially British. We've got a Prime Minister standing here trying to make a rather sober point to the rest of the country while the Ode to Joy, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, is playing in the background, while the rest of us are all focused on a train heading from Piccadilly to London and then indeed following the black cab from Euston.
Yeah, a delayed train actually as well. And then, as you say, watching the black cab get stuck in the London traffic on esse way to Westminster. Very prosaic, very British. And Andy Burnham there speaking about, in answer to Sam's question, saying, oh, you're jumping several steps ahead, there are many more hurdles to come. Well, I have to say those hurdles are being rapidly cleared out of Andy Burnham's way. As you say, after the Prime Minister's statement, the most significant development this morning was that confirmation from Wes Streeting that he would fold, he would endorse Andy Burnham to be Labour leader and therefore Prime Minister. So those hurdles that have stood in Andy Burnham's way for several weeks, he wasn't an MP, he needed to find a seat, he needed to win a by-election, and then he needed to win the support of enough MPs. Well, those hurdles are rapidly being cleared out of his way.
Wes Streeting's team adamant this morning that nothing has been promised in return for him standing aside. What do you read into that politically?
Well, I mean, I think there's a limit to what we can read until any confirmation of any job is announced, but it certainly seems clear that we know that Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting have been speaking extensively in the last few days. We know they have had multiple conversations since that Makerfield by-election victory on Thursday into Friday morning. So we don't know the nature of those private conversations. As you say, Wes Streeting's spokesperson vehemently denying any deal has been made, but it was interesting, Wes Streeting's statement. He laid out some of the arguments that he's been making about what he calls progressive capitalism, and saying that he thought those ideas could find a home in an Andy Burnham administration. So I think at least it sounds like as if there has been some kind of guarantee, at least from Andy Burnham, that some of the themes that Wes Streeting has been talking about in the last few days and weeks will indeed find that home under an Andy Burnham premiership. Interesting that
Lucy Powell was travelling with Andy Burnham, chair of the party, an advocate for Andy Burnham's leadership credentials, thought he should have been in the contest a lot earlier than he was. Does that speak to what kind of Andy Burnham is coming here to London? Well, I mean, Lucy Powell's been quite a long-term friend of Andy Burnham, as you say, deputy leader of the Labour Party. I think what is really interesting about when we think about the makeup of a possible Andy Burnham cabinet administration, what practical difference this will make is look at some of the people that he has surrounded himself with. Miata Fahnbulleh, one of the government ministers to resign, one of those first government ministers to resign. She, on the one hand, has quite a different economic vision from, say, someone like Wes Streeting, from, say, someone like Josh Simons, the MP for Makerfield, who stood down to make way for Andy Burnham. So I think there is I think we can call it a tension at the heart of some of the people that Andy Burnham has surrounded himself with, and I think that is the question now, is what kind of direction does Andy Burnham take the party in, take the country in, and what people does he surround himself with? Yeah, and obviously just behind you is number 11. A lot of focus on that door already. There's been all sorts of names banded around over the last few days. Maybe it's an Ed Miliband, maybe it's a Wes Streeting. Might he be minded to stick with Rachel Reeves just for some continuity? I mean, it is possible. I think that seems unlikely if you are the candidate promising change. If you say, as Andy Burnham did in his victory statement, that this is the party's last chance to change, it feels like there's a limit to how much you can change direction with the same Chancellor in place. Although it's worth saying that Andy Burnham has said that he would stick by Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, he would stick by those core promises on tax that Labour made and Rachel Reeves really advocated for in that Labour manifesto, not to raise the main rates of income tax, VAT or national insurance. So some of the core principles that Rachel Reeves has advocated in her time in number 11.
Andy Burnham has said will remain the same, but it's difficult to see how he can argue that he brings substantial change, at least to the party, while Rachel Reeves at least is in office. It's possible that he may want to signal continuity, where he wants to signal stability, but the tone and the direction that we've heard from Andy Burnham in the last few days is very much that he wants to bring a change to the Labour Party and therefore the government.
Yeah, just a word on Sir Keir Starmer. I was here obviously earlier this morning, his voice cracking with emotion at the end. I'm sure he had in his mind a way that he wanted to deliver that speech, but it's a huge moment for any man or woman that makes that announcement to the country, and perhaps it reminds people out there it's a rough and tough sport, politics, but there are human beings involved in this and a family involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. A reminder of, as you say, the humanity of the moment, as well as the brutality of politics. I mean, coming out to deliver this statement, not just in front of the British press here, not just in front of the hundreds of cameras, but I was walking into Downing Street, the American news networks, TV channels from right around the world, and it's a reminder of the significance of this moment, not just here in the UK, but right around the globe. We are, of course, a permanent member of the National Security Council, one of the G7 countries. We're hosting the G7 summit next year. So this is a big moment, not just here domestically, but internationally as well.
Indeed so. Harry, thank you very much indeed. You see that in the statements, actually, that we've had from President Zelensky, Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President also speaking very warmly of Sir Keir Starmer today, in fact, referring to him as Dear Keir. You'll see on right of screen there the gates at the Palace of Westminster. We are imminently expecting the arrival of Andy Burnham. There is on the calendar a swearing-in ceremony expected around 2:30 this afternoon. Kitty Donaldson, chief political commentator at The Eye, is with me. Hello.
Hello.
You ever experienced a morning like that?
No, it will happen much more quickly than I thought it would. I thought we'd be here for hours actually waiting for the Prime Minister, and in fact some people in number 10 didn't even know he was about to do it until about 5 minutes beforehand. Yeah, so it was a very tight circle. Very few aides knew what was happening. The wider Downing Street team were told about 5-7 minutes beforehand. Then the guy with the lectern came out. He's a regular fixture on the political scene now, isn't he? We see him every couple of years. Came out with the lectern and history was made.
He has only a little bit of agency left, and that is to dictate what happens from this point.
Yep.
And he wanted to set out the terms of a contest, beginning July 9th, ending September, just in time for the party conference season. But if there's no challenger, then surely it happens much, much quicker than that.
It does, and absolutely. And the key next step, which happened this morning, was when Wes Streeting, the former Health Secretary, said, I'm not going to challenge Andy Burnham. I understand the two of them spoke this morning, Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting. And I think Wes Streeting, although he does, and I'm told he did have the numbers to challenge, decided that actually the wind was in Andy Burnham's favour and decided to step aside. And I expect Wes Streeting will be given a job in Andy Burnham's cabinet.
How senior a job?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, he was pretty senior before, wasn't he?
Yes.
Health Secretary.
And his record was not bad.
Not bad, no.
Not bad.
Wait
So he was
till it's
pointing
beginning
to
to come down, But actually what everyone's focusing on now, and particularly the money markets are focusing in on who's going to be in number 11, because that will show us the direction of travel for what Andy Burnham's going to do in terms of borrowing, in terms of spending, in terms of tax rises. Who he puts in number 11 is the next key appointment.
We've not heard from Rachel Reeves. We did see her earlier today. She went off for a run, strangely, which might actually speak to the fact that maybe she didn't even know. I don't know, but she went around 8 o'clock this morning for a run.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything from her team?
Not from her team, no. They're keeping their counsel. I saw some of her advisors standing outside, clapping Keir Starmer. It was quite a sad moment, I think, when they all came out. So it was, you realise the kind of staff costs of all those people who are loyal to Keir Starmer, and presumably Andy Burnham, well, we know he'll bring in a whole bunch of his new people. And actually, there's kind of interesting point there about party unity going forward. Who does Andy Burnham put in his cabinet? Are some of the kind of soft left going to be disappointed when he tries to perhaps reach out to people on the right of the party, people like Wes Streeting, people like Shabana Mahmood, and keep them in cabinet? Are people on the soft left, and there are a lot of people expecting jobs, are they going to be disappointed?
I've been making the point through the day, actually, that what's going to be most interesting this afternoon, obviously, is going to be received as the conquering hero, because we've been talking about this for weeks. But the number of MPs stood around him, the sort of jockeying for position that begins now, if he is the intended Prime Minister. That all begins this afternoon as soon as he lands.
Well, I think it already started, actually. You saw that kind of steady trail of people going up to Makerfield to kind of, with their Andy banners.
The pilgrimage.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it, actually. But I was told at the time there were two spreadsheets, one of kind of long marchers and one of sort of Johnny-come-latelys.
Right.
And the team has got a very clear idea of who's been on their side, out in the wilderness and who's sort of just arrived. So I think the sheep from the goats will be separated.
I've done this we've all done this many times in recent years.
Yeah.
We're on the 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. But the helicopters above, the way we're following the car, the train, it feels like that day when we're expecting a new Prime Minister to drive through the gates.
Yeah.
And yet we're not at that point.
No, we're not. It's really strange, isn't it? Because presumably the business of government is still going on inside. There's a NATO summit coming up. I mean, the Prime Minister was supposed to give a statement this afternoon to the House of Commons about the G7 summit. I think he sent David Lammy in his stead. But you're right, the drama, as it were, is at Euston Station. I think we've seen Andy Burnham arriving, and now he's about to turn up to Parliament. There's going to be a photo call at 3:30 with everyone, and you'll be absolutely right. Who will be elbowing each other out of the way to stand next to Andy Burnham and be kind of, I'm here.
I talked about how we're perceived on the world stage. We used to point the finger at Italy, rotating prime ministers. Now we're very much in that position.
Yeah.
And you talked of the NATO summit. How are we thought of now on the world stage? Post-Brexit, Defence Secretary and his number 2 resigns just before the NATO summit. The Prime Minister is out. We're a bit of a laughingstock.
Well, I'm afraid I think we are, actually. Just cycling through prime ministers like they're going out of fashion. I think Ed Davey called it a merry-go-round this morning, and I think he was right. But there's a sort of more important, it's not just the personnel, is it? It's the sort of long-term strategic thinking. It's the social care, it's the NHS, it's all the decisions that need to be made for a sort of 10-year, 15-year cycle aren't being made because we're cycling through people so quickly.
Kitty, it's lovely to see you. Thank you very much, and no doubt we'll speak again soon as we learn more of Andy Burnham's plans. We talked about Wes Streeting and the letter he put out this morning, perhaps short-circuiting this leadership contest. He's been in conversation with our political editor, Chris Mason. Let's have a listen.
Look, I think Keir Starmer leading us to a general election victory that no one thought possible will go down in the history books as the man who saved the Labour Party. But it's become clear that new leadership is needed, and that Andy Burnham, with his campaign in Makerfield, won back a part of the country that only weeks ago had overwhelmingly rejected Labour, which shows that if Labour changes, we can still win. I think Andy is the person to lead us to do that. And after conversations we've had in recent days, listening to Andy's ideas, reflecting on some of the ideas I've been setting out in recent weeks, we could spend the next few weeks, we could spend the summer splitting hairs on small differences, or we can pull together and we can unite and we can do something the Conservatives failed to do, which is to pull together, to change, to win back support that we've lost in the country, to deliver the mandate that we're elected on, and to make sure that the people who have felt disappointed by Labour feel they got the Labour government they voted for. I think Andy's capable of doing that. That's why he's got my full backing.
What's the catch? Has he offered you the Chancellor's job, the Foreign Secretary's job?
He has not offered me any jobs. That's not what our conversations have been about. This has been about the ideas that we need to deliver the mandate we were elected on, but also to rebuild trust in the Labour Party and to rebuild hope in our country again. And what Andy did in Makerfield was truly remarkable. It was a place that only weeks ago Labour got completely smashed. And in the conversations I had with people on the doorstep in Makerfield, it showed that there are lots of people out there who voted Labour, who felt disappointed in us, but absolutely going to be there for us if they feel they've got a Labour government delivering the change they voted for. I think Andy's capable of doing that. I think there's far more that unites us than divides us. And I think the Labour Party should now pull together, come together under Andy's leadership and deliver the change that people voted for.
Final question. What do you say to our viewer who says this is all being stitched up behind closed doors? There's no scrutiny of the potential next Prime Minister. There's no contest where they are properly stress tested. It's all happening in the blink of an eye.
That Andy Burnham will set his stall out and he will lay out his vision for the country, how he wants to lead differently, how he wants to change not just the culture of the Labour Party, but the way we do democracy in this country. I think he has got the vision. I think he has got the ideas and frankly the priorities that are reflected in communities across the country. Like, how do you make sure that we have an economy that isn't just growing, but where everyone has a share in that success? How do you make sure that kids from all backgrounds, especially working class backgrounds like mine, have the same choices and chances in life? How do you make sure that in this dangerous and volatile world that Britain is safe and secure on our streets, at our borders, with our national security too? And how do you make sure that in our democracy that people feel that their vote counts, that voting does change things and that things can be better by making your voice heard at the ballot box? I think it's an exciting vision, and it's one that I'm going to get behind, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same.
Andy Burnham has the vision, the ideas and the policy, so says Wes Streeting. Let's get a view on that. Max Wilson is a former Labour Party advisor, now head of White House Communications. It's a public affairs agency. Good to see you, Max. What do you make of that? That seems to be a meeting of the minds. Does that tell us something about the kind of Prime Minister Andy Burnham would be?
I think so. I think that Wes Streeting has probably quite wisely recognised the depth and breadth of support for Andy Burnham. I think that what happened on Thursday in Makerfield changed the political conversation. I think that before the by-election, sure, Andy was in a good place and he certainly had an awful lot of parliamentary support. But I think the sheer numbers involved in Makerfield, the sheer majority that he got, has created a sense of momentum and a sense of inevitability about Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister. And I think that Wes has recognised that actually it's better for the Labour Party and the Labour government for all the different wings of the party to come together. And I'm sure that's what Wes is expecting to see, hence some of the writing and the language in his resignation letter. His letter.
This is a picture on
Burnham, I was going to say.
Yeah, of course. This is a picture of Andy Burnham just arriving at the Palace of Westminster. All smiles, of course. I'm sure there are lots of friends, former colleagues and MPs who are there and ready to talk to him about what they would like to see from a Burnham premiership. In terms of the speed with which things now happen, Max, we've just been discussing with Kitty Donaldson the agenda or the timetable that Sir Keir Starmer had set out. Is that realistic in mind of what has happened in the last few hours?
No, it's not. And I think this is an extremely fast-moving situation, as you know. I think that at about 9 o'clock this morning, it was feasible that this could go on until September. But I think that with Wes now supporting Andy Burnham, I think that momentum is now unstoppable. And I can't see a scenario in which any other Labour candidate gets to 81 nominations. Now, the nominations are now open for, 2-3 weeks. I can see a scenario in which other MPs put themselves forward to try and attempt to get nominations, to try and shape the debate. But I cannot see a situation in anyone actually gets to 81. So I think that by the time we get to the second week of July, Andy Burnham will be the only person left standing with the full 81 nominations. And I fully suspect it to be more like 200 nominations.
And so what is the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister's role in that?
Well, he is still, he has two roles. He is Labour leader and he is also Prime Minister. So as Prime Minister, it is his constitutional duty to carry on the government and leading His Majesty's government whilst this happens off stage. As Labour leader, he will be working with the Labour General Secretary and the chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party to facilitate this nomination process. As the NEC, the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, will be meeting, and I believe in about 2 hours' time to decide on some of the further details of the timetable. But really, as going back to my earlier point, this is all quite hypothetical, really. I think that what's in reality going to happen is that the vast majority of the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs that make up the PLP, are going to row in behind Andy Burnham. He is going to get plenty of nominations, and I think that by the time we get to that first or second week of July, it will be all sewn up, and I fully expect Andy Burnham to be invited by the King to form a government soon after nominations close.
Our correspondent Nick Eardley made a really interesting point earlier this afternoon. We were talking about the two Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, who were returned with huge majorities and yet very quickly were out of office. And he made the point that actually maybe bigger majorities carry more danger because you get a party that splits into different factions. They want different things when you've got such a broad alliance of MPs. Do you think that is the problem within the Parliamentary Labour Party?
I think that's one of the problems that Keir Starmer has faced in government. There have been political problems, there have been unforeseen global problems as well. But certainly the depth and breadth of the Parliamentary Labour Party has been an issue. I think you're right that something similar happened with Boris Johnson in that the Tories in 2019 ended up winning in areas that they weren't expecting and ended up with MPs that they weren't expecting. It was difficult for them to manage that. Similarly with Labour, I think that it's not just the sheer number, having 400 odd Labour MPs to manage, but I think the bigger problem was having so many Labour MPs with such small majorities. These Labour MPs were not prepared to weather some of the political problems that were inevitable from a set of circumstances left to Keir Starmer from the previous Tory government. And that was part of the political problems that Starmer encountered. And I have to say that I think that many of these problems will also be faced by Andy Burnham. But I think that he has such goodwill and such breadth of support that I would hope that he will be able to weather these problems fairly easily.
Just a thought on the lack of a contest and the fact that there are no other people who want to step forward to take him on. There are over 400 MPs in the Labour Party in Westminster. Are we actually saying that there's no one with the requisite talent and abilities to become the Prime Minister, or at least to challenge Andy Burnham?
Certainly not. There's incredible talent on the Labour benches. We've already seen several MPs suggest that they wanted to be put forward. But I think that, as I said, going to my earlier point, I think that the sheer size of the success that Andy Burnham delivered in Makerfield has acted as a rallying point for so many Labour MPs. Labour MPs are looking at the polls and they're concerned not only about the course of this government, but they're also concerned, frankly, about the future of their own seats and whether they're going to be able to get re-elected in 2029. They are panicking about the threat of reform for both the country and for their own constituencies. And I think that what Makerfield has acted is not necessarily a proof point of Labour's ability to defeat reform under Andy Burnham, but it's provided that sense of hope. There's an optimism now that at least Labour stands a chance against reform under Andy Burnham. And I think that enough Labour MPs are now looking at the political situation and deciding for themselves that actually the best thing for the Labour Party, for their own prospects of getting re-elected, is to follow Andy's leadership. I think they just think that the best chance of Labour winning is now under Andy Burnham.
Max, good to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for that. Those are the pictures of Andy Burnham just making his way into Euston this morning, talking to reporters on his way here to the Palace of Westminster. He has arrived. Nick Eardley is at Central Lobby. What's the atmosphere like, Nick?
It's actually quite calm just now, Christian, if I'm honest. It's a Monday, so a lot of people are arriving back at Parliament. Since I last saw you a couple of hours ago, I've been wandering around chatting to a few Labour MPs, and you know, there is a bit apprehension about what happens next. Remember that most Labour MPs won't know Andy Burnham. When he left Parliament, they weren't MPs, so they're going to have to get to know the man that is almost certainly going to be our next Prime Minister. But there's always on these days where there's a sense that the page is turning from one chapter to another. There's always a sense among MPs that anything's possible. And I do think that some in the Labour Party are optimistic, or at least hopeful, that they can start to get back on course and build their position in the polls.
Nick, I'm just going to break away from you for a second just to show our people the chamber, the House of Commons chamber. You can see that everyone has taken their seats. And it is likely that in the next few minutes we're going to see Andy Burnham sworn in as a new Member of Parliament. Let's listen in to the Speaker.
Come to the table. Laura Bird, Member for Arbroath and Broughton Ferry. Royalty Ferry, in fact.
I take this oath only so that I can serve the people of Arbroath and Broughty Ferry. My first allegiance is, and always will be, the sovereign people of Scotland. I do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to the law, so help me God.
Douglas Lumsden, member for Aberdeen South.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
No brave heart from him.
We now come to Andy Burnham, member for Makerfield.
Rome is saved.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God. Naughty boy.
I didn't hear the
Turn the water into white.
We now come to questions to the Secretary of State for Education, Jim Dixon.
So there we go, the swearing in of 3 new MPs from the recent by-elections. Lara Bird of the SNP, from Broughty Ferry, Arbroath and Broughty Ferry. Then Douglas Lumsden, the Conservative, who was returned in Aberdeen South, gained the seat from the SNP. It's the first Conservative gain at a Scottish by-election since 1967. And then Andy Burnham, who won with almost 9,000 votes more than Reform. You heard the gentle ribbing there from the opposite benches, somebody shouting, "Naughty boy, the world is saved, water into wine." All smiles in the chamber this afternoon. Let's bring in Nick Eardley, who was listening along to that. He took it in quite good part, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, Andy Burnham has tried to portray himself as somebody who you can get along with and he can have a bit of a laugh. Interesting that he seems to have changed his clothes since that journey down on the train. He's back in a suit, and I would expect we'll hear a bit more from him in the next hour when he meets some Labour MPs. We're expecting him to do something of a photo call, and it'll be really interesting to see who turns up, who is there to give him support as he tries to kind of shore up his position and say, look, I've got the backing of the Labour Party now, I'm ready to take over as Prime Minister.
Do you think the work now begins this afternoon, Nick? I mean, he will get a feel very quickly, I think, from this point, whether there is going to be a contest. I'm sure the whips are letting him know if there is anybody that would want to stand. If that is not the case, then what does the priority become over the next few days?
Whatever happens, the big questions Andy Burnham is going to face over the next few days are about policy, because we have heard him do a few interviews over the course of that Makerfield by-election. He's obviously someone who's been in the public eye for some time and is often asked those big questions about policy. But even in the past couple of hours, chatting informally to Labour MPs, there is definitely a nervousness about what his full policy prospectus would look like. Yes, we know that he is probably going to follow broadly the manifesto that Labour set out at the general election. That's what his allies say anyway. We know that he's going to stick, he says, to the fiscal rules that were set out by the last Prime Minister, those ones about not borrowing, about tax, about some significant ways in which to keep the economy in a controlled place. But the big question Andy Burnham is going to face is, what are you going to do differently? Are you going to shake things up in any key areas? What are you going to do on social care, that area that you've always talked about? How are you going to fund defence, something that's been a real pressure point over the last few years? Are you going to cut welfare in the same ways that Keir Starmer was hoping to do? What are you going to do to ensure that extra housing that you've talked about over the last few weeks? There are big policy questions on the domestic front, and then big questions about his approach to the global stage as well, because he's immediately, if he becomes Prime Minister next month, going to be thrust into some massive questions about the relationship with President Trump, about the reset of the relationship with the European Union, which was planned for next month but is now being postponed. So, you know, Andy Burnham is going to face very quickly a deluge of detailed questions about what he wants to do with power, assuming that the majority of people around Westminster are right that he's heading for number 10 very soon.
And the opposition, Nick, I mean, we've heard something from Sir Ed Davey today, the Liberal Democrat leader, who said it's becoming something of a merry-go-round here in Downing Street. What are the other leaders saying?
Well, look, what often happens at a time like this when there's a change of Prime Minister is there's a demand for a general election. And we have heard that from Reform UK, from Nigel Farage, saying that the public need to be given a say if there's going to be a change of leader in number 10. Interestingly, the Conservatives have been less likely to call for a general election, partly I think because of their position in the polls. There will undoubtedly be some big questions over exactly what Andy Burnham is going to do. The Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, for example, saying, well, hold on, if we all think it's going to be Andy Burnham as the next Prime Minister and Keir Starmer is resigned, announced his plan to stand down, what are we waiting for? Why is it going to be another 5 or 6 weeks before he's in number 10? I think that is a question to watch over the next few days. Mr Burnham's team want some space to flesh out their policy offering, but there will be some pressure, I think, to speed up this process a bit if it becomes clear that absolutely nobody else is even going to bother trying to stand for the Labour leadership. And I suppose that is the kind of strange position we're in now. Andy Burnham is almost certainly 99% likely to be Prime Minister within weeks, but the pressure and the questions are now turning to what exactly he's going to do when he gets the keys to number 10.
I'd be keen to know your thoughts on Chris Mason's interview with Wes Streeting, Nick. He talked about Andy Burnham having the vision, the ideas, the policy. I called it a meeting of the minds. But that's really interesting because they are slightly from different sides of the party, and I wonder whether that signals what sort of leadership Andy Burnham is going to represent.
It's a cynical old place, Westminster, Christian. There was a lot of speculation that Wes Streeting was talking about a leadership bid to try and shore up his position and get a decent job in Andy Burnham's top team. Here we are today with him saying, I'm not going to stand after all. Look, I mean, his team are adamant that there were conversations over the weekend. Wes Streeting decided to fall in behind Mr Burnham, and he's not been offered a big job in the cabinet. However, it is worth looking at where he ends up. But one of the really interesting things is the speculation about who's going to be Chancellor. There seems to be an increasing belief among Mr Burnham's supporters that it won't be Rachel Reeves, that she's on the way out with Keir Starmer. It'll be fascinating to see who Mr Burnham picks. There's been a lot of speculation in the newspapers. It might be Ed Miliband, the former Labour leader, the current Energy Secretary. That seems to be waning a bit. If it was someone like Wes Streeting or Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, someone else who's been speculated as a front-runner for that job, they are completely different in their approach to Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband's on the left of the party, Wes Streeting's on the centre of the party. Ed Miliband is very committed to the race to net zero. Wes Streeting has talked about not leaving behind the world of oil and gas. So in that sense, exactly where this is going to end up is still quite a confusing question. Mr Streeting backing Mr Burnham isn't a huge surprise, I don't think, given the momentum behind Andy Burnham. But let's see what Mr Burnham says over the next few days. Let's see what he says over the next few hours.
Nick Eardley, for the moment, I know you'll be getting us lots of reaction through the afternoon. Thank you for that. Well, let's just focus on what the leaders of the opposition groups have been saying this afternoon. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, one of those that has raised concerns over how long it will take to replace the Prime Minister, saying it risks leaving the nation exposed.
Well, we need to ask why he set out this timetable. What are we waiting for? There are critical decisions that need to be made, and the Prime Minister is setting out his farewell tour while Andy Burnham wants a summer holiday. It's really, really important that we ensure that the country is being governed. Keir Starmer has had to resign because his Defence Secretary said he was not looking after national security. Whatever happens now, we need to make sure that national security is the #1 agenda. And that means that Andy Burnham needs to explain where the money to fund our defence is coming from, and he needs to cut welfare to pay for defence.
Do you think there should be a contest? Should Andy Burnham have to prove himself and his ideas?
Well, winning an election and winning contests is not the same as having a governing agenda. I set out at the beginning of this session some urgent things that really needed to be done. Drilling our own oil and gas in the North Sea, backing British energy, lowering bills, getting people off welfare and into work. That's what Andy Burnham needs to be talking about right now. But the Defence Investment Plan is very urgent. There is no point the Prime Minister going to NATO summits when he's not paying for our defence. What's Andy Burnham going to do about that? He hasn't said anything. I'm quite worried that the focus is all on the Labour Party, not on the country. And the fact is that whoever is the leader, we still have the same problem. Those Labour backbenchers who are not interested in defence and who refuse to bring down the welfare bill.
That is the view of the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. Let's hear them from Reform UK. Nigel Farage has been giving his reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's resignation.
Being Prime Minister, I can only imagine how tough it is. So on a human level, yeah, I'm sorry for the guy that he failed, but he did fail. And I think he'll be upset, but I think the British public will be upset. You know, most of the things this Labour government did were not even in their manifesto in 2024. And we're about to get our 6th Prime Minister in 7 years, which is sort of Italian-style fast politics going back a few decades. And whoever becomes the Prime Minister will not have been voted for by the British public. And if the next Prime Minister is the new MP for Makerfield, Andy Burnham, he didn't even stand at the last election on any manifesto at all. And I really do think that my call for there to be a general election as soon as is possible, I think you'll find a lot of support for that.
Do you not accept that that would be destabilising, uncertain for the country, and what we need right now is certainty and stability?
What is destabilising for the country is 6 Prime Ministers in 7 years. That's destabilising. I think the great British public deserve to give their opinion. I really, really do.
That is the view of Nigel Farage. The Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has also been speaking and gave this reaction to the changes happening at number 10.
I think people are pretty fed up with the merry-go-round of Prime Ministers. 7 Prime Ministers in 10 years, 5 Conservative, 2 Labour. Nothing seems to change. So just changing the person at the top won't deliver the change that people need. We need to change our broken political system. And if we do that, yes, we can rebuild our relationship with Europe and grow our economy and deal with the cost of living. Yes, we can reform social care so we can get our NHS better. And we can have electoral reform and put power back to communities. That would be real change. So let's reserve our judgment on Mr. Burnham.
So Ed Davey, you see, they're all talking about Andy Burnham. And we don't know that it's going to be Andy Burnham, although maybe we do. Laura Spirit is with us. She's the Deputy Political Editor for the Sunday Times. Does it feel as if the decision is already made?
I think it feels like it's becoming much more likely that we're going to see what allies of Andy Burnham have, and many other people have called a coronation. In other words, that we won't see anybody else perhaps take on Andy Burnham. I think there are a number of reasons of that. Wes Streeting is obviously a very big one. You know, the former Health Secretary who was considered to be a kind of would-be candidate as recently as a few weeks ago was saying he would definitely be standing in any possible future contest. And of course, him throwing his weight behind Andy Burnham does, I think, raise the stakes for others who might say, OK, well, should I give it a shot? I think it's worth saying that in recent weeks there has been some concern, particularly from some of the women in the Parliamentary Labour Party, that actually there's no women in this race. Some would hope that the Labour Party might have its first female leader at some point. Would it be an opportune moment just to have somebody on the ballot paper to have part of that conversation? There are others who say perhaps it'd be a good idea to test Andy Burnham, to give him an opportunity to lay out his ideas. But I think, given what we're seeing, given the fact that there does seem to be a growing number of MPs who are giving their weight behind Andy Burnham, there does seem to be momentum on his side. It is harder, I think, now at this point to see anybody managing to, or wanting to throw himself forward and to get the requisite amount of support to do that.
He has been challenged before in 2 former leadership contests and he came up short.
Yeah.
And you heard one of the wags in the chamber just now who said, "The world is saved, Andy Burnham is here." That's a lot of pressure to carry into that job.
It is a lot of pressure. I think for those who are close to Andy Burnham, they would say, look, a contest might not necessarily be the best opportunity to help Andy Burnham, and I think question the motives of some of those who think that a contest is a good thing for the Labour Party because it would allow him to set out his vision or to think about it, in a clearer way. Actually, a contest tends to be a bit of a drag through the mud for the people that are part of it. It would require Andy Burnham probably to disavow key parts of the Labour agenda, of work that's been done in the last couple of years. Now, his brand of politics has been to try and not say negative things about too many people. You've seen that even in Makerfield. I mean, he wasn't attacking the Robert Kenyon, the Reform candidate there, very frequently at all. And actually, I think having a contest for some who want to see Andy Burnham bring the party together would actually be something that actually would probably be more likely to kind of drive it apart.
I know as a former Sunday correspondent myself that your agenda is slightly different to everybody else's. You're looking into the crystal ball and slightly into the future. So no doubt you're going from here today to look at who might be in the cabinet,
exactly,
who's been promised what policies take priority. What are your formative thoughts on where that might go this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good question. For what it's worth, obviously, the Burnham team keeping absolutely silent on this question, insisting there have not been, direct conversations or decisions made on this point, that there's no kind of big blackboard where, as you might see in a cabinet reshuffle inside the building behind us, for example, they're sort of drawing out who would be in any of these given positions. They say that's absolutely too premature to speak like that, but I reported at the weekend that Rachel Reeves would not be the Chancellor, that she would be dismissed in a Burnham premiership, and I think the Chancellorship in particular is being focused on as the absolute key position in part because people are looking to see what direction Andy Burnham goes in, also in part because Ed Miliband was previously considered to be something of a frontrunner in that race. There are some very serious doubts among some close to Burnham about what that might mean, particularly on his flexibility around issues like North Sea oil and the wider net zero agenda. And for that reason, I think it's become a really big question, as it has because some are speculating that Wes Streeting, of course, the former Health Secretary, having thrown him weight behind Burnham, may well have done so because he would expect a very big job, and could that perhaps be the Chancellorship? So I think that's one of the big questions, but of course other questions about who will be in the Cabinet will also be front of our minds.
I'm trying to imagine a newly elected MP coming to Westminster. They meet the whips, they meet Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, they're given their pass, they're shown around. Of course, he doesn't need to be shown around because he's been here before. But then they get an office, a parliamentary office, which today might not be in keeping with the scale and enormity of what Andy Burnham is now taking on. And maybe indeed there is a small office somewhere on the Palace complex with a long line of people down the corridor waiting to speak to him.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried to kind of gauge exactly what it would be. Is there going to be a big campaign office somewhere else in London? I mean, I think you're right to say that one of those kind of small cubbyhole offices in the Palace of Westminster will not be enough space to contain the many people who want to come and meet Burnham. And actually, Burnham's team have been quite open about this and saying that even before the events of this weekend, these early days when he was in Westminster, he's got a lot of people in the Parliamentary Labour Party he hasn't met yet, because he was obviously here 9 years ago. He doesn't know these people. He's been told about the fact that there's this wealth of talent, much of which has been untapped, they think, under Keir Starmer government, and they want to meet many of these people to see whether or not they might be in line for possible jobs in the future. So he's got to meet a lot of new faces over the next coming days too.
Best of luck with that story this weekend. Thank you very much indeed, Laura. Good to have you alongside. So we'll continue to cover plenty more about what is going on here around Downing Street and, of course, at the Palace of Westminster. But I need to bring you some breaking news, some quite serious breaking news, which has come to us in the last few minutes. The former leader of Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has been found guilty of raping a woman while she was a child. Donaldson had pleaded not guilty to 18 historical charges, including one count of rape arising from allegations he sexually abused 2 women when they were children. But a jury of 5 women and 7 men convicted him of the rape, 4 counts of gross indecency and 13 of indecent assault. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has this report.
This was the most high-profile trial in this part of the UK in recent times. 2 women accused one of Northern Ireland's best-known politicians of sexually abusing them when they were children. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson's long career began in the 1980s, forged in the cauldron of conflict.
And I have 2 members of my family, members of your force, murdered.
As the violence gave way to peace in Northern Ireland, Donaldson became a mainstay in the places of power. The peak of his influence in Westminster came when he negotiated an agreement to keep Theresa May's minority government in office. As leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Donaldson blocked devolution in Northern Ireland for 2 years. He agreed to restore it after a new deal on Brexit arrangements early in 2024.
We will be able to look back on this moment as the defining time when Northern Ireland's place within the Union was safeguarded.
But there was a different defining moment only weeks later, when he was arrested and charged.
Quite often, if a scandal breaks anywhere, and it just in politics generally, there's a usual reaction, the majority of them, well, no surprise. This was a huge surprise, and not just across unionism. For someone that basically he was one of the few household names unionism had, and certainly a figure that everybody in Northern Ireland knew.
The trial at Newry Crown Court heard evidence from the 2 women across 5 days. One of them, known as Complainant A, received a letter from Donaldson in 2020. In it, he expressed regret for the hurt, pain and distress he had caused. Donaldson claimed the letter had nothing to do with the allegations against him. The woman known as Complainant B told the court Donaldson had apologised to her at a meeting at this Christian centre in County Antrim in the 1990s. The defendant claimed he'd said sorry if she had ever felt uncomfortable or unhappy about him, and no allegations of abuse had been mentioned. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson himself gave evidence for about 10 hours over the course of 2 days. He suggested to the jury that the 2 women who'd accused him of abusing them were lying. A prosecution barrister put it to Donaldson that the only person telling lies was him. The case has generated more discussion about how survivors of abuse can be supported, particularly if their abuser is well known. A charity which works with victims says it can be all the more daunting for them to come forward in those circumstances.
Their biggest fear is, will I be believed? And if it's a historical issue, there's maybe no forensic evidence that is available. So it literally is one word against another. And in a high-profile case like this, the victim has to balance out, will I be believed if this person has a position of trust, respect in a public arena? How will that look if I come forward to discredit that?
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson would once have expected his legacy to be purely political. Instead, he'll be overwhelmingly remembered now as a man convicted of sexual crime. Chris Page, BBC News.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser, live in Downing Street, where it's been a high day of drama. Andy Burnham has been formally sworn in as the new MP for Makerfield, having confirmed he will stand for the Labour leadership. He was sworn in to loud cheers from Labour MPs just a short time ago. Let's listen in.
We now come to Andy Burnham, member for Makerfield.
Rome is saved.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
And after signing his name in the test roll, that's a book made of parchment, Burnham then had a friendly exchange, as you can see there on your screen, with the Speaker of the House of Commons and Labour MP for Chorley, Lindsay Hoyle, as he officially became the Makerfield MP. It's been quite a morning. We've watched Andy Burnham clear up his office in Manchester, get on a train at Manchester Piccadilly and head down here to London Euston, and because of the focus around him, we've been following that journey intimately. Our reporter Sam Harrison spoke with Andy Burnham as he got off the train.
I made my statement obviously praising the Prime Minister's dedication, service, and confirmed that I will put myself forward in the process that will soon be underway.
When Rishi Sunak did that and he became Prime Minister, you called for a general election. Would you be looking to do the same?
I think you're jumping several hurdles ahead there. My priority today is to become sworn in as the Mayor, as the MP for Makerfield, and it's been very kind of sad for me today to leave Greater Manchester. The people have been brilliant to me over the last few years. I've loved every minute of the role. I hope I leave Manchester in a better place, but thanks very much. Thank you.
Andy Burnham talking about his time in Manchester. You might have seen just walking up the platform with him many of the same team that were with him in Manchester, where he made a success of that job. We talk about him as a potential Prime Minister because at the moment we don't really have a contest. Wes Streeting has confirmed this morning that he will back Andy Burnham for Labour leader, removing the strongest potential challenger to him. And he has been speaking to Chris Mason.
Look, I think Keir Starmer leading us to a general election victory that no one thought possible will go down in the history books as the man who saved the Labour Party. But it's become clear that new leadership is needed and that Andy Burnham, with his campaign in Makerfield, won back a part of the country that only weeks ago had overwhelmingly rejected Labour, which shows that if Labour changes, we can still win. I think Andy is the person to lead us to do that. And after conversations we've had in recent days, listening to Andy's ideas, reflecting on some of the ideas I've been setting out in recent weeks, we could spend the next few weeks, we could spend the summer splitting hairs on small differences, or we can pull together and we can unite and we can do something the Conservatives failed to do, which is to pull together, to change, to win back support that we've lost in the country, to deliver the mandate that we're elected on, and to make sure that the people who have felt disappointed by Labour feel they got the Labour government they voted for. I think Andy's capable of doing that. That's why he's got my full backing.
West Streeting's statement in the last couple of hours, well, that raises huge questions about the timetable going forward. Officially, as set out by the Prime Minister here today, nominations for the new Labour leadership open on the 9th of July. So far, as I said, Andy Burnham has no competition. Starmer will remain as caretaker Prime Minister until that contest is complete. His successor will be Britain's 7th Prime Minister in just 10 years. We'll have all the political reaction to that here in Downing Street. But first, let's take a listen to some of that resignation speech from the outgoing Prime Minister.
But I know the question being asked now is not who was best placed to change the Labour Party, to take us into power and to begin the vital work of improving lives for millions of people. Those questions have been answered. The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power. I will also give my successor my full and unequivocal support, knowing that they will inherit a Britain that is far stronger and fairer than the one I inherited 2 years ago, better prepared for the challenges ahead, and better able to ensure the Labour Party secures a second term in office.
It's Keir Starmer setting out his reasons for his resignation earlier today. With me here in Downing Street is Nick Watt, Newsnight's political editor, and our political correspondent Harry Farley. Welcome to you both. As we speak, I'm being told that there is a photograph being prepared with Andy Burnham and Labour MPs and cabinet ministers standing around him, including, Harry, many of the Starmer loyalists.
If you want a sense of how quickly politics moves on, Johnny Reynolds, Keir Starmer's chief whip, his Chancellor Rachel Reeves, one of his most loyal cabinet ministers, Steve Reid, all there to greet the new Labour MP for Makerfield. And of course, no secret about what Andy Burnham's ambitions are, and his ambitions lie behind that black door behind us. So pretty much almost the entire Parliamentary Labour Party gathering for that photo call, that photo op, and to welcome their new MP and potentially their new leader.
Yeah, it's a brutal old game, this, isn't it? Somewhere behind that door, perhaps, is a Prime Minister outgoing. He had everything this morning and now he has nothing.
Yeah, and look, obviously quite an emotional moment. There was a catch in Keir Starmer's voice, and then when Andy Burnham was being sworn in, it was all quite light in the chamber. Desmond Swayne, who's a Conservative MP, as Andy Burnham walked in, he said, "Rome is saved." And then somebody said he's not the Messiah, and then full life of Brian, it didn't take Andy Burnham to say I'm just a naughty boy. And then there was a joke about him wearing a tie, because you saw the pictures of him arriving at Euston Station, trademark, not with a tie. Well, he did have a tie in the House of Commons, because obviously he wants to be Prime Minister. So you go from the emotion and the sadness of here to quite a light atmosphere in the House of Commons as he's sworn in, and then all those bigwigs in the cabinet standing in front of Andy Burnham. That's not technically endorsing him for the leadership, it's welcoming the new backbench MP for Makerfield.
Oh yes, well I noticed when Lindsay Hoyle announced him, I mean he's dutifully impartial, of course, the Speaker, but he did elevate his voice somewhat as he welcomed Andy Burnham to the chamber again.
Yeah, absolutely. No question over which of those three MPs who were just introduced was the most significant, the most newsworthy, I suppose, the most interesting. And I thought that was, you're right, Nick. There was a sadness to this morning, the personal, the humanity of the moment shown when the Prime Minister went over to greet his wife afterwards, tears in his eyes. So I suppose the reflection there of the brutality of politics that we then saw again with how quickly his cabinet have moved on. I think the only question now really is whether there is any contest for that Labour leadership. 323 is the number of Labour MPs that need to publicly endorse Andy Burnham in order for there not to be a possibility of anyone else joining that race. And it was interesting, I was speaking to one Wes Streeting backer just a few moments before Wes Streeting's statement dropped this morning, arguing strongly to me that it was so important that there was a contest, that there was a battle of ideas, only for then a few minutes later their person who they wanted to take on that leadership, in Wes Streeting, folding and rowing in behind Andy Burnham. So events have moved very, very quickly indeed today.
Kitty Donaldson had an interesting line for us this afternoon. She was talking, political editor at the Eye. She said that she'd heard from staffers within Number 10 that they didn't know until about 5 or 6 minutes, some of them, before he made the statement. It was a very tight circle of people that were involved in the decision. He was at Chequers over the weekend with his wife, clearly came back and then told only a small group of people on his return.
I mean, remember in Downing Street you've got the political staff and then you've got the civil service staff, and the civil service staff, who are permanent people, they're there forever, they may not necessarily know. And then there's the political staff, some who are very close to the Prime Minister, some who are not. So there will be a reasonable number who didn't know, but there will have been some who did know because they had to know, and there will have been some civil servants who had to know because the Prime Minister spoke to the King. And when the Prime Minister is speaking to the King, some pretty serious civil servants are going to be involved in that process. But yes, it was a difficult process. And if you want to sort of track the journey that's gone in Keir Starmer's mind, look at his supporters. So on Friday morning you had Steve Reed, Harry was mentioning him, now standing with Andy Burnham. Steve Reed doing the morning round, saying absolutely Keir Starmer will fight on. And I had one senior figure comparing his performance to Komal Ali. Tanks going into Baghdad, Komal Ali said it was all absolutely fine. Wind forward to yesterday on Laura's show, and you had Peter Carl, Cabinet Minister, incredibly close to Keir Starmer, saying he's listening, he's thinking, he will act in the national interest. You knew which way it was going at that point.
Yeah, obviously all conversations now turn to, if it is Andy Burnham, to the preparations he's making, what policies are paramount for him, who sits around the cabinet table. But the really big question that faces him first is who goes through that door, number 11. What do you think his team are thinking about who they put? What sort of politician they put in that, in that position?
That will be the key decision. And we were talking earlier about some of the, I think we can call them differences of background in Andy Burnham's team. The difference of background between, for example, someone who's come from the more left of the party, someone like Miatta Fahnbulleh, compared to someone like Josh Simons, the Labour MP who stood down for him, who of course used to run that Labour Together think tank that oversaw Keir Starmer's elevation to Labour leader. They come from very different political traditions within the Labour Party. So who is the ascendant voice? Where does that listening ear come? Who does that listening ear turn to? Is it someone like Miatta Fahnbulleh? Is it more like Josh Simons or Wes Streeting, of course, who has now rode in behind him? What role does Shabana Mahmood play? Of course, one of the early cabinet ministers we know to ask the Prime Minister to set out a timetable for his departure. So I think we talk a lot in politics about personalities and who the key people will be, and the reason that matters is because those people have different ideas, they have different priorities and different policies, and who Andy Burnham puts in that door in number 11 as his Chancellor will tell you a lot about the direction of travel that he wants to take.
I wonder about Miatta Fahnbulleh because she came out quite early. She obviously resigned her position and came out in support of Andy Burnham quite early. And Laura Spirit was just, from the Sunday Times, was just making the point that yet again there's no female in the job at number 10. Labour have not chosen a woman to lead the party. do they need a woman in number 11 to balance that out?
I mean, Miata van Buller is an incredibly serious person in the Labour Party.
In her own right.
And if you're thinking of a future leader of the Labour Party, if you want to go down to the betting shop, not that we do that at the BBC, Miata van Buller is an incredibly serious person. She is a very, very distinguished economist and academic. She was a minister, she resigned, so she's a very, very serious person. And you really want to be looking at her for the future. In terms of the Chancellor, I mean, obviously Rachel Reeves has said that she would like to stay on. But if, as Andy Burnham believes, this lot have been a failure, then you'd want a new Prime Minister, as we're getting, and a new Chancellor. So who are you looking at? The obvious front runner would be Ed Miliband, because Andy Burnham knows him and he trusts him. But would he want to do that? Would that show that you're too sort of close to the soft left of the party? So maybe it's Wes Streeting. They've obviously now got a good relationship. But does he really, really trust somebody like Wes Streeting? So then you're looking at perhaps Yvette Cooper and perhaps John Healey. What you're going to want is somebody you can trust and somebody who is very experienced.
OK, we'll have a look at this picture, because this is a selfie that Andy Burnham, I think, has just put out, a photograph of him post signing in. Actually, I'm sure this is not his picture, not his selfie, but you can see all the politicians around him. Who would you pick out of that? Nick Eardley, I'm being told, took the photograph. So there they are on the steps in Central Lobby. Who would you pick out in that picture that stands out to you, closest to him?
Lucy Powell, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, right in the centre there. Fellow Greater Manchester MP, has known Andy Burnham for a very, very long time. And the interesting thing about Lucy Powell, after she was elected as Deputy Leader, don't forget she was outside the Cabinet, and she declined to take a position in the Cabinet as Deputy Leader, as you would normally do if Labour is in government. She has not been causing trouble. She has been supportive of Keir Starmer. She has deliberately not sort of acted as the role of a dissident, but she is very, very close to Andy Burnham. They've known each other for a long time, so my eyesight's not brilliant. No. So the one person I can absolutely see there is Lucy Powell, but she's a very significant
Might
figure.
have something to do with Nick Eardley's exposure. We'll challenge him in a second.
And don't forget that Lucy Powell has her own power base within the party. She was directly elected into that role, so she's not just an appointment at the mercy of Keir Starmer.
I made the point, when you watch these pictures of him coming onto the platform at Euston Station, there is most definitely a team around him and close advisors who he, like you say, who he probably trusts from his former role in Greater Manchester. But other commentators this morning have talked about MPs who have helped spirit his leadership campaign in recent weeks and done a really good job and surprised the people in number 10 currently.
Well, you saw, obviously, when he was being signed in as an MP, he had his supporters. I think it was Annalisa Midgley and Joe Platt, who are two people who are very close to Andy Burnham. Annalisa Midgley was always much more identified with Angela Rayner, but it's become very clear in recent months that Angela Rayner, Greater Manchester MP, is very much with Andy Burnham. So yes, I mean, it has been quite a serious operation by Andy Burnham. Going back to the Labour conference last year, absolutely seminal interview with the New Statesman, when he made it pretty clear that he was putting a stake in the ground. I remember I doorstepped him at the Labour Party conference. The Downing Street of Keir Starmer thought they'd seen him off. They thought all that blew up in his face. Well, no, he put a stake in the ground and he never gave up. Tried to become MP earlier this year with Gorton and Denton. It took the poor performance of Labour in the May local elections for Keir Starmer not to be able to use the rules of the Labour Party to prevent him standing, and in he came. So it's quite something when you're not an MP to be the overwhelming front runner and looking pretty likely that just a few weeks after he comes in as a backbench MP, he's Prime Minister.
And one person to add to that is, of course, Louise Haigh, the former Transport Secretary, absolutely central to Andy Burnham's campaign, both in Makerfield and his campaign among backbench MPs. We're just looking now at that picture, that selfie, that picture of Andy Burnham taking a selfie with all those Labour MPs.
I mean, that's really interesting. Let's bring in Nick Eardley, who was there, because I would hazard to guess, I've not seen these sort of events before, Nick, perhaps neither of you, where almost the entire Parliamentary Labour Party comes out for someone who's won a parliamentary by-election.
Just the number and breadth of people that were there for Andy Burnham's photo shoot. I can tell you the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was front and centre. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, was there. Former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party was there. The Chief Whip, Jonathan Reynolds, was front and centre. And what was striking was even Keir Starmer Uber loyalists, right up into the last moment, were there as well. Steve Reid, the Housing Secretary, among those who turned up to support Andy Burnham. I mean, look, we were talking about this when I was with you earlier. There's very little doubt that Andy Burnham is going to be the next Prime Minister. If there was any doubt, I think a lot of it has been extinguished by the fact that, you know, scores and scores of Labour MPs, I can't give you an exact number, I was trying to count, but I was too slow. Like, well over 200, I would say, Labour MPs were there supporting Andy Burnham as he arrived. It feels everywhere you go in Westminster today that Andy Burnham is just a Prime Minister in waiting, and the questions that will emerge now over the next few days are about exactly what he's going to do, not so much whether he's going to end up there.
Do you get any sense from talking to people there this afternoon, Nick, what his next movements are going to be, what his job today is, who he's meeting, who he's talking to?
Well, look, he was having conversations with a number of MPs in Westminster Hall there. Interestingly, normally Westminster Hall you can kind of roam freely, but we were all kept a bit back, so I can't tell you what any of those conversations were, I'm afraid. We'll try and find some MPs who he was chatting to over the next couple of hours to get a bit more of a picture of what he was saying when he was taking that selfie. Look, I mean, in terms of what the Andy Burnham does next, I think he will spend some time with his team over the next few hours trying to work out their exact movements. When you chat to his allies, they are very much of the view that some space is a good thing for him to figure out exactly what his next steps are. Remember that it's only this morning that he's arrived in Westminster. Remember, a lot of the Labour Party in Parliament won't have met Andy Burnham. Yes, he used to be a senior MP. Yes, he used to be a cabinet minister, but that was before most Labour MPs were elected here. So he has a lot of hands to shake, a lot of conversations to have, but also a lot of planning to do about what almost everybody here accepts is now inevitable before he enters number 10.
There you can see Angela Rayner there, front and centre in that particular picture. I guess one of the important conversations, Nick, is with the Chief Whip to find out if there is anybody that is gathering support in the party or anybody showing any intent to run against him.
Yeah, I mean, look, Andy Burnham, I'm sure, will be delighted that Wes Streeting has decided that his campaign isn't going to get off the ground, that he's going to fall behind Mr. Burnham. We were talking about this earlier. It's not impossible that somebody who wants to test Mr. Burnham's policies a bit throws their hat in the ring. I've got to say, speaking to people around here, I'm increasingly sceptical they would get near the 81 MPs backing them that you need to get onto a leadership ballot, which would push this beyond mid-July and mean that Labour members get a say. Let's see what happens over the next few hours, but it does seem increasingly inevitable that Andy Burnham is heading to number 10, and increasingly likely that that will be a coronation rather than a contest. So it's all now about what Mr. Burnham wants to do, what his priorities are, and what his policies are on some of those areas which he's not been pressed on yet.
Nick, stay with us if you would, because Nick Watt is with us here at the live point in Downing Street. Do you get a sense that this timetable that Keir Starmer set out today is going to be truncated quite quickly?
Well, look, it feels to me the first part of the timetable will hold and the second part won't. So the first part of the timetable is nominations open on the 9th of July, and then they close on the 16th of July when Parliament raises. It is looking highly likely there will only be one candidate. So it will probably look like on the day that Parliament rises for the summer, on Thursday the 16th of July, there will be one candidate, and on Friday the 17th of July, I'm willing to bet, not that I place a bet, that you, Christian Fraser, will be standing here and there'll be a podium moment with somebody called Andy Burnham.
Who will have just come from the King, who was informed earlier this morning that Sir Keir Starmer was leaving. He was the first to know, officially. In terms of Sir Keir Starmer's mood right now, just looking at these pictures, some of his closest friends, colleagues, people who ran with him when he became leader of the party, now alongside Andy Burnham, who I'm sure he feels has knifed him. I mean, he tried to stop him coming to Westminster. He couldn't hold it back any longer. Will he be angry, disappointed, betrayed, do you think?
Well, as I understand it, Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer's relationships are not exactly very warm at the moment. And everyone forgets that Andy Burnham was actually Keir Starmer's first front bench boss here. So Keir Starmer was elected in 2015. His first front bench job was as a junior member of Andy Burnham's Home Office team. Keir Starmer was the shadow immigration minister, so they know each other. They've gone a long way back. As I understand it, Keir Starmer was not wildly pleased when Andy Burnham was not overly supportive of him in the 2020 leadership contest. So their relations are really poor, as I understand it. There are members of the Keir Starmer sort of circle. We were talking to Jenny Chapman earlier, who understand what's happened. They've accepted it, but they are very, very sad. But I've just been talking in Parliament to people who were close to Keir Starmer but are no longer. And they say that they're getting really aggressive comments from some of Keir Starmer's supporters. They've been shouted at, and it's really unpleasant. And they say that that is reflecting sort of the deep sadness in that inner circle. Absolutely not saying that that's the sort of behaviour that Keir Starmer and Jenny Chapman are doing, but there are people who are having very, very difficult conversations.
With respect to Andy Burnham and the people he chooses, presumably there will be rewards for people like Lucy Powell, Angela Rayner, people who've drifted out of cabinet in recent time. I know she's the chair of the party now, but still, you would think prominent positions for very close colleagues and people who've backed that leadership campaign.
Yes, I mean, very close colleagues, but obviously Andy Burnham would say Lucy Powell and Angela Rayner are hugely significant figures in the Labour Party. And isn't it a pity that Lucy Powell felt that it wouldn't be right to be in the cabinet? I would imagine he'd want her in. Isn't it a pity that Angela Rayner, after she was cleared on her tax affairs and the stamp duty, declined an offer of a job in Keir Starmer's cabinet? So yes, he would want to bring all the talents together, but I would imagine that were Andy Burnham right here, right now, he wouldn't just say, I'm putting my gang in, I want to bring the party together, which is why I imagine you might well find that Wes Streeting will probably be around that Burnham cabinet table if Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister.
Yes. Which he's not yet, but we will see. We will see which way this contest forms over the next few days and weeks, no doubt. Well, let's take a moment to look back on Sir Keir Starmer's premiership, because we've had David Lammy here shortly after the speech setting out the legacy as he sees it, and there is a list of things that he thinks the Prime Minister has achieved while in office for that short 2 years. Joe Pike has been taking a look back at the Prime Minister's record.
We said we would end the chaos, and we will. We said we would turn the page, and we have. Today we start the next chapter.
The man who rose to power partly due to his opponent's struggles with standards has now been brought down after a series of his own misjudgments.
Thank you.
Appointing Peter Mandelson as US ambassador was perhaps the worst, yet it was a disastrous set of election results, the subsequent parliamentary mutiny and a looming leadership battle that eventually helped end Sir Keir Starmer's time at the top. His premiership, which started with a stunning electoral success,
our work is urgent, and we begin it today,
has been on the slide for months, and will ultimately be remembered as one of early errors, wasted opportunities and plummeting popularity. Keir Starmer was named after Keir Hardie, Labour's first parliamentary leader. His life began in Surrey, the son of a nurse, and, as he regularly reminded voters, a toolmaker. He studied law, appearing on TV in the 80s to discuss restrictions around acid house parties.
Have you been to one? Week. I haven't. We have hundreds of inquiries. We've been advising the organisers.
Hang on, why haven't you been to a party? How can you organise or advise them if you haven't been to them? Why haven't you been to one?
In the same way that we advise burglars without being burglars.
In 2007, he married Victoria Alexander, with whom he has 2 teenage children. And the following year, after spending decades in human rights law, he was appointed to be England and Wales's top prosecutor. Sir Keir was elected to Parliament in 2015 at the relatively late age of 52.
Do you want to be Prime Minister?
I'm not going to fall into
No,
that.
what?
It'd be like asking me whether I want to play for England. My son said to me the other day, shall I play for Arsenal or Chelsea when I grow up? I mean, that kind of conversation, I think, is that helpful.
A pivotal moment in Starmer's rise was when, as Shadow Brexit Secretary, he flirted with the idea of a second EU referendum.
It's right that Parliament has the first say, but if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
But after he took over as Labour leader during the pandemic, Keir Starmer demonstrated a ruthless streak, suspending Jeremy Corbyn from the party he'd recently run, tacking to the political centre and turning around Labour's electoral fortunes in a single term. But while his lack of politics was to some his selling point, it also contributed to his downfall. Within weeks of Labour's 2024 landslide, the PM and Chancellor announced one of their most unpopular policies: cuts to winter fuel payments for pensioners. They reversed on that almost a year later. And there were other major policy U-turns on inheritance tax for farmers, welfare cuts and an inquiry into grooming gangs. Among his domestic legacy is the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap, a new law to strengthen workers' rights and the social media ban for under-16s.
So can I present the letter from the
But
King?
it was foreign policy where the PM had more success. Dubbed Never Hear Keir for his frequent trips abroad, his initial handling of Donald Trump.
This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit.
Resulted in a better trading relationship than many other countries.
A document.
He attempted to keep the US committed to Ukraine, diverged from Washington in recognising a Palestinian state, and more recently disagreements over Iran have fractured that friendship.
You know, unfortunately, Keir is not Winston Churchill.
Sir Keir Starmer achieved something remarkable in turning round his party's fortunes fast, but he failed to do the same with his country, and the speed of that failure has been remarkable too.
Yeah, well, let's listen back, shall we, to that full resignation speech. Not everybody will have seen it. It happened just after 9 o'clock this morning, came very quickly in the day. Here is the speech from the beginning.
Thank you. Walking up this street 2 years ago was the proudest moment of my life. A new Labour government, the first in 14 years. A page in our country's history turned after years of disappointment and despair. The chance to change the lives of millions of people for the better. That's what I came into politics for. The journey to that point was not easy. 6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt. I was told time and time again that my party was finished, that we were consigned to history, that a majority at the general election, let alone a landslide majority, was impossible. But we proved those people wrong because we changed our party, ripping out the poison of anti-Semitism, restoring trust on the economy, defence and national security, and becoming a party that once again stood proudly with, not against, our national flag. The hard work of change was with a singular purpose, not power for power's sake, but to change Britain for the better, to build a fairer country with dignity and respect, where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, wealth and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few. And look at what we've achieved in just 2 years. An economy that is stronger, growing faster than our peers, wages rising faster than inflation in every single month since we came to power, investment secured, infrastructure being built, an end to austerity, with the fastest fall in NHS waiting lists for 17 years, the biggest improvement in rights for workers and renters in a generation, the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War, small boat crossings falling, asylum hotels closing, protecting young people from social media, and 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty because of the choices that I made. Our reputation in the world restored, with Britain once again standing up for decency, respect and the rule of law, securing trade deals, standing with Ukraine, standing up for our values, and rebuilding our relationship with our allies in Europe. Change promised by a Labour government, change fought for by a Labour government, change delivered by a Labour government. But I know the question being asked now is not who was best placed to change the Labour Party, to take us into power and to begin the vital work of improving lives for millions of people. Those questions have been answered. The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power. I will also give my successor my full and unequivocal support, knowing that they will inherit a Britain that is far stronger and fairer than the one I inherited 2 years ago, better prepared for the challenges ahead, and better able to ensure the Labour Party secures a second term in office. I want to thank all of those friends and colleagues who have been at my side for these past 6 years or so, for their incredible commitment, service and support. I want to thank the brilliant Number 10 staff and our country's extraordinary civil service who dedicate their lives to public service. And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
That sort of emotion does come to most Prime Ministers, doesn't it? I think as they get to the end of their speech, they suddenly realise the enormity of the situation they're under and the pressure that they've been under in the run-up to a speech like that. Let's go back to the lobby. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley is there. He's got Zuba Ahmed, the Glasgow MP, who of course stood aside, Nick, in support of Wes Streeting.
Yeah, I do indeed, Christian, and let's throw to him right away and ask that question. I mean, Zuba Ahmed, you were a supporter of Wes Streeting. You were one of the people who wanted him to stand for the leadership. What's changed?
Well, first of all, Nick, there's a lot's gone on today. I just want to pay tribute to the Prime Minister. He's done the right thing and the morally right thing, and he can be proud of his record as someone that switched us from the second worst defeat in our history to the second best victory in our history and kept us out of war in Iran and put us back on the international stage. Since then, of course, we've seen Andy have an absolutely stonking result in Makerfield, and if anyone knows Makerfield, knows that that was going to be a 9,000 Reform majority predicted there, and he flipped that to a 9,000 Labour majority, and he did that with the sheer force of his personality, his record of delivery, but also on the mandate of change. And he unified people that you would have normally voted for Reform, normally voted for nationalism, to come back to Labour. And in that sense, if you can do that in Makerfield, I know you can do that in my constituency in Glasgow South West, in places like Pollock and Govan. And I think Wes has recognised that self-interest needs to be put to one side. The country is not in an appetite for a long and prolonged contest, especially when he reflected that they're much closer in their views of where the Labour Party should go than people would otherwise realise, and therefore he's swung his weight behind Andy, And I'm happy to support Andy because I think he has demonstrated with that victory and with his track record they can deliver for the country like he's delivered for Makerfield.
You were just in that photo call that Andy Burnham did in Westminster Hall with, I mean, it looked like most of the Parliamentary Labour Party were there, including the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, including people like Johnny Reynolds, who's the Chief Whip, who was one of the Prime Minister's allies. Is this over? Are you just of the view now that the Parliamentary Labour Party is ready to give Andy Burnham a coronation?
Look, what you saw there was the Labour family coming together. Look, we can all have different views. We have had different views. We will have different views. What I've been heartened by in the last couple of weeks is people that have diametrically opposite views from me as to where the party should be going under leadership. We can have very comradely, convivial discussion, and that gives me great heart that we're going to come together very, very soon under new leadership.
Under Andy Burnham, without anyone else standing?
I think Andy is just in the door. He's just been sworn in. I think we have to give him time and space and a bit of oxygen to familiarise himself back with the place. He was, of course, here for 16 years. He'll lay out his agenda. I've been heartened by some of the stuff he's been saying.
Like what? What do you think Andy Burnham's going to do differently?
I think we've had an issue about people in the north of the country, which includes Scotland, by the way, feeling linked to this place. Both politically and also economically. It's one thing to say we've had a percentage of growth. And if you're not feeling it in Ashton or Hindley or in Govan, Pollock, Moss Park, where I live, it's a problem. And that disconnection, I think, is real and it's something Andy can bridge.
I'm really struggling to understand what that means in practice.
Well, I think, for instance, first of all, we're talking about defence. So we've got to get that pinned down because that is a priority, I think, for anyone that comes into office. And we've drifted. John Healey didn't need to resign. And someone of a mark of his man doing so tells you that that was something that needed much more clarity and vision and to imbibe confidence in our international partners. So I think that will take hold.
So more money for defence from Andy Burnham?
I think the Defence Investment Plan has to be pinned down, and if that means more money, we need to take some tough decisions to defend our country, because the first...
Do you think Andy Burnham's going to come in and immediately say to other departments, cut your spending so there's more for defence?
Well, I think Andy's been quite clear already that he supports the defence of our country and he'll do whatever it takes.
I don't think anybody's saying they don't support the defence of the country. The big question is, what big decisions is Andy Burnham prepared to make? Do you think that Keir Starmer wasn't?
Well, you'll have to ask him exactly what his agenda is. But I think though...
Wait a minute, is that not the problem? Andy Burnham, if you ask the vast majority of Labour MPs now, is Prime Minister in waiting. But we don't know exactly what he thinks.
Well, listen, give him a chance. I think he's just in the door. I think on the defence thing, he's quite clear. He is willing to make some tough decisions. He's going to probably, come forward if he is Prime Minister, ask for what you do when you're a minister in a smaller department or a bigger department, ask for some options and take some decisions. I think salami slicing 1% across the board was not, unfortunately, a decision. Similarly, in health, where I used to be a minister, there are some big decisions to take around data sovereignty, about how fast we move on with the online agenda.
Social care.
And indeed, we've got big decisions coming on the consultant contract, as well as junior doctors. So we can make some tough decisions there and move things on, I think.
Do you think that Andy Burnham has to stick to the word of the Labour manifesto?
I think he certainly had to stick to the principle of the Labour manifesto and as a blueprint, and he said that already. But I think within that there's a lot of flexibility about how we do things. I mean, the social media ban is a classical example of that. I think we need to push on and get that done. A lot of my women parliamentary colleagues have been, battering on the door of number 10 Downing Street for almost 24 months, wanting that to be sorted, and they didn't get a direct answer. I think now we've got an opportunity to sort things like that out very expediently, so we protect the next generation in a way that, kids of my kids and of their generation were not able to be protected.
Money is the biggest problem for this government. It doesn't want to increase taxes any more than it already has, but it does want to spend on things without necessarily cutting other things. So there is a very difficult backdrop, is there not, for the new Prime Minister, that his room for manoeuvre is pretty small, but your party wants pretty big things to happen.
Listen, there's no doubt about that, but even again within the confines of the fiscal rules, he's been talking about the difference between taxing labour and your toil versus the dividend from wealth, and so has Wes. So in that sense, they're not been that far apart in terms of progressive capitalism. We're talking about an end to neoliberalism, as Andy calls it. We can have those nuanced discussions, and we can still retain the incentive for entrepreneurship in that discussion. So I think there is a lot to do, even within the confines of the fiscal rules.
Let me ask you about Wes Streeting quickly. He has insisted that no deal has been done for him to get a top job. Do you think he'd be a good Chancellor?
Look, I think Wes is a generationally talented politician. There's few people in our era that can give 85-minute long-form interviews, 1-hour-long speeches on the economy and what society should look like 10 years out from now. He's got a big role to play, I've got no doubt about that.
Zubir Ahmed, I appreciate you coming and putting some flesh on the bones. There's a lot more of that, I suspect, to have over the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Christian, that was the Glasgow MP, Zubir Ahmed, who was a big backer of Wes Streeting, now a big backer of Andy Burnham.
Yeah, but as you say, Nick, there are lots of people up and down the country who don't know Andy Burnham, don't know what he stands for. Let's get some idea on that from the people who know him best, the people in Manchester, reacting to the news today that he is leaving his post as mayor to, of course, throw his hat on the leadership here in London. This is what they had to say.
If you think that you are the same as everybody else, then you will get on with everybody else. And he has shown his love for the city. We are big Doves fans. He is a big Doves fan, so he knows the music, he knows the city.
I'm a big Andy Burnham fan and have been for a long time. I just hope he doesn't disappoint everyone.
So why you say you're a big Andy Burnham fan? Why is that?
For what he's done for Manchester, he's completely turned it around, made it one of the fastest growing cities in Europe, and hopefully he can make it for the whole of the UK.
He needs to be more out there. I mean, Keir Starmer's been very timid. You know, I think Andy needs to, if he wants to do well, he needs to stand up to the media a lot more. He needs to actually put out a message a lot more, drive a story a lot more. If he can do that, then he'll be fine.
So, a number of people in Manchester who know Andy Burnham quite well. Let's speak to someone who knows him really well. She is the Labour MP for Shipley, Anna Dixon. Anna Dixon, good to have you with us on the programme. I wonder what will be going through Andy Burnham's mind this afternoon. Suddenly there's an enormous amount of pressure on his shoulders.
Yeah, but Andy's a very experienced and successful politician. You know, he's been in as a politician for 25 years. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for 20 years ago when he first took on a junior minister position in the Department of Health. And of course, you know, since then he's led one of the big city regions in the country, Greater Manchester, for 9 years. And in that role, obviously delivered huge growth and, you know, knows how to deliver. But obviously, yes, it's a big moment for him coming back into Westminster again. But the great thing is that Andy knows this place. He knows both how it works, but also what's wrong with it. And I think he's seen that really clearly in how it's not been delivering for places like Makerfield, for whom he now is the MP. And he wants to use that experience that he's got together with the passion that he's heard on the doorstep and the hope by the people of Makerfield to now bring that change to the country.
He has delivered at a local level. He has not delivered an agenda on the national level of what he's being asked to do now. Why is he more suited to this job this time around than the two previous times when Labour thought he wasn't up to being the top man?
Well, as I say, I mean, he does have that experience of sitting round the cabinet table previously. But as I say, I think being leader of a big city region and, you know, making decisions that have really put Greater Manchester on the map, that have seen high levels of growth, perhaps when other parts of the country haven't. You know, anybody you heard there from the people of Manchester who are so enthusiastic about him because they get on buses every day that work, that only cost them £2. You know, he's done things there, improving public services, getting people into work, creating really good jobs. And as he's already started to say, he wants to bring some of that to a national stage and make sure that, you know, the Makerfield test, making sure that the decisions that are made in Westminster and Whitehall deliver for communities, not only in Makerfield, but all of those communities across the country, in every part of the country, who feel that Westminster has not been delivering for them.
Well, a lot of people feel the Labour Party has not been delivering for them, and we've seen U-turn after U-turn. How is Andy Burnham going to bring the left of the party together with the centre of the party?
Well, I think we've seen in the positivity around the campaign in Makerfield, there were people from not only all over the country, but all wings of the Labour Party coming together. And I think this is a moment for unity. The country do not want to see us to descend into a chaotic leadership campaign. And I do give credit to Wes Streeting.
So you don't think they should test his ideas? I mean, I know you're a close ally, but there are other MPs who think that his ideas should be tested.
Well,
that other people should come forward and challenge him.
Well, I mean, I'm a supporter, but I am not a policy spokesperson. Obviously, we have a manifesto. That is the mandate for the Labour government. Even if we, are changing the leader of the Labour Party and ultimately have a new Prime Minister, we still stand by our manifesto.
But are
this
you
is
happy
about
that it's
delivering it with more ambition and with more speed.
Are you happy that it looks like a coronation?
No, I think that there is certainly, we live in a parliamentary democracy. We have a mandate as a Labour government. I want to give credit to the Prime Minister. He's been leader of the Labour Party for 6 years, Prime Minister for 2. The inheritance that we had after 14 years of the Conservatives was terrible, and he has put things on a sound footing. It's not to say that we don't face challenges, and we will need to look again at some aspects of the manifesto as to whether we can go further and faster. I'd like to see us deliver on the promise that was there for a national care service. At the moment, we're only getting ideas. By 2028 from the Casey Commission, I think we should be getting on with laying the foundations of a national care service as soon as possible.
Okay. Anna Dixon, grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Anna Dixon says there is a record to be proud of there. Let's look back then, shall we, at Keir Starmer's record. Ben Chew of our BBC Verified team has been doing that.
Yes, Christian, the growth has been the key watchword for Keir Starmer while he's been in power. He said it's his top priority on numerous occasions, and the Labour manifesto pledged that they would deliver the fastest, the highest sustained growth in the G7 group of nations. Well, have they achieved that? Well, in the first quarter of 2026, UK's growth was the highest in the G7 at 0.6%. But the International Monetary Fund expects that over the next 2 years, we will not actually be top of the leaderboard. We will be below the likes of Canada, France and the United States. Of course, another key benchmark for Labour has been immigration. Now, if we look at net migration to the United Kingdom, it has come down significantly under Labour to 171,000 in 2025, well down from more than 900,000 that was seen under the Conservatives in 2023. But there's small boats as well. The number of small boat arrivals across the Channel has continued to rise under Sir Keir Starmer's premiership, although in 2026 so far the numbers are down on the arrivals in 2025. So there is some progress there that the government and Sir Keir Starmer can point to. So we've been looking at all these things on BBC Verify and others, including what's happened to energy bills, what's happened to NHS waiting lists, what's happened to benefit payments. You can read all about our analysis on the BBC website, Christine.
Ben Chew, thank you very much indeed for that. Nick Watt is still with me here in Downing Street. I want you just to react, if you could, to the two Labour MPs that we've just heard from. One who is quite obviously an Andy Burnham ally, and another in Zuba Ahmed, who was closer to Wes Streeting. What does that tell us, those two interviews tell us about the direction the party is taking?
Well, what those two interviews show us is what I think the Parliamentary Labour Party is thinking. Is it's not so much they want a coronation, it's what they don't want. What they don't want is a bloody fight. And they're worried that that would make the party look self-indulgent, that the party was elected 2 years ago to govern the country, and they need to show that they can govern. So having a sort of a contest where people tear strips off them over the summer, as happened in the summer of 2022 after Boris Johnson stood down. Do you remember the famous Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss debate? They think that wouldn't be a good idea. That's the argument for that. The argument in favour of a contest is you need to stress test a candidate. And if you don't stress test a candidate, then you end up with Gordon Brown. So Gordon Brown, the premiership of Gordon Brown looked great for about 2 or 3 months until he toyed with a general election, thought seriously about having it, dropped the ball, and he never recovered. And you'll famously remember he pulled the emergency cord and said, Peter Mandelson, I need you to show me how to do it. So that is the argument about why you need to stress test a candidate.
Let's have a quick listen, Nick, to David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, who's making a statement on the NATO summit, which is coming up. Obviously, the Prime Minister would have been expected to go to that, but I think, sorry, not on NATO, on the G7 that they've just had in Evian-les-Bains, we would have expected the Prime Minister maybe to make this statement, but it's David Lammy who's at the dispatch box.
A shared sense of outrage at Russia's conduct, but, Mr. Speaker, we also have a shared sense that this situation is changing too. Ukraine has a newfound momentum. They are increasingly able to push Russia back on the battlefield, and in Moscow, the mood is turning against the war. Almost 500,000 Russians have now lost their lives. Each month they mobilise around 30,000 people, and each month they lose the same number on the battlefield with no progress to show for it. At the same time, the Russian economy is struggling and may already be in recession. And so we will seize this moment by continuing our military support, providing more air defence missiles and our biggest package of drones to date, financed with the profits of seized Russian assets. We're providing vital export finance to help rebuild Ukraine's energy system, and we're going further to increase the pressure on Russia's economy because we know the impact that this is having. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced 70 new sanctions at the summit, bringing the UK to around 500 sanctions on Russia this year alone, aimed at breaking up their military procurement supply chains, the illicit finance network they use to circumvent sanctions, and targeting, of course, the Russian shadow fleet. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will want to pay tribute to the Royal Marines, who interdicted a shadow fleet vessel in the Channel last week alongside officers from the National Crime Agency. Mr. Speaker, this is the moment to ramp up the pressure. President Zelensky is clear that he is ready to talk, but this must recognise the reality on the ground and Ukraine's newfound momentum. Any negotiations would need to be on the basis of the current line of control, not on Putin's unrealistic demand for territory that he's failed to win on the battlefield. And Mr. Speaker, Russia should note the level of unity shown on this point and the G7's pledge of unwavering support for Ukraine. That will continue until we reach a just and lasting peace. Mr. Speaker, let me turn now to the Middle East. Getting to the deal between the United States and Iran has been bumpy, but it creates a moment of opportunity to bring down the cost of living for the British people and put the Middle East on a better path which is vital for global stability. We are now working to help implement this deal to ensure that the region doesn't go back to war and that the 60-day negotiation period ends in a longer-term settlement. Mr. Speaker, negotiations are the best way to secure our aims. One, that Iran is never allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Two, that they stop their attacks across the region. And three, that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened to shipping with no restrictions and no tolls. And that's why, with President Macron, we have brought together an international coalition ready to help reassure shipping. We are in talks now about how to deploy this multilateral military mission in support of the deal and to explore immediate support for demining in the Strait. But, Mr. Speaker, we should also place this in the broadest possible context, recognising the need to make progress across the region. The extremely fragile ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon must be implemented in full. And I call on the Israeli government to show restraint to that end, including in its use of inflammatory language. The G7 agreed to work together in support of their process and strengthen the Lebanese government so that they can regain the monopoly on the use of force in the country. And Mr. Speaker, on Palestine, I want to speak very frankly. Israel must stop blocking aid into Gaza. It must stop settlement expansion in the E1 area of East Jerusalem, which threatens the very viability of the two-state solution and stop settler violence across the West Bank. We have a precious opportunity now to move on from the violence of the last 3 years in the interests of innocent people across the region. This should be our aim, bringing all our partners together in that effort. And Mr. Speaker, significant progress was also made last week on migration, with a strong G7 statement outlining practical common steps on returns and sanctioning the criminal gangs. And with President Macron, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, took a big step in our bilateral cooperation, agreeing to extend the groundbreaking Sandhurst Agreement, which has already prevented more than 40,000 migrant crossings into the UK. Under this deal, new police units and riot squads will be deployed to French beaches to stop migrant boats before they take to the water. This is vital and important work. And Mr. Speaker, it's because of steps like this and the approach of this government that we have removed 67,000 people with no right to be in our country. We've removed 9,000 foreign national offenders, and we're closing asylum hotels, and we're turning the tide.
David Lemmy, the Deputy Prime Minister, informing the House of what was discussed in Evian-les-Bains last week at the G7. There are newspapers reporting in the last few minutes that the Brexit summit between the UK and the European Union, which was scheduled for July, I think, Nick, what is that right? 27th of July. That has been postponed in the midst of the leadership contest that is underway. So we'll get some reaction to that after this short break. You're watching BBC News. I'm Christian Fraser, live at Downing Street, where it has been a day of high drama. Andy Burnham is now the new MP for Makerfield and has also confirmed that he will stand for the Labour leadership, a job that would also make him Prime Minister. He was sworn in to loud cheers from Labour MPs.
We now come to Andy Burnham, member for Makerfield.
Rome is saved.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
Andy Burnham being sworn in. He then had a very friendly exchange, as you can see, with the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, as he officially became the Makerfield MP. Plenty of ribbing in the House as well this afternoon. He then posed on the steps of Central Lobby with around 200 MPs for photographs in Westminster Hall. If we stay with these images, you might just be able to pick out some familiar faces here. There's Lucy Powell, the chair of the party, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, Jonathan Reynolds. These are close allies of the outgoing Prime Minister, and of course Angela Rayner, also a Manchester MP. The new MP for Makerfield did speak to our reporter Sam Harrison very briefly as he got off the train in Euston, arriving here in London.
I made my statement, obviously praising the Prime Minister's dedication, service, and confirmed that I will put myself forward in the process that will soon be underway.
When Rishi Sunak did that and he became Prime Minister, you called for a general election. Would you be looking to do the same?
I think you're jumping several hurdles ahead there. My priority today is to become sworn in as the Mayor, as the MP for Makerfield, and it's been very kind of sad for me today to leave Greater Manchester. The people have been brilliant to me over the last few years. I've loved every minute of the role. I hope I leave Manchester in a better place, but thanks very much. Thank you.
Huge questions then going forward. Nominations for the new Labour leader opens on the 9th of July and they close a week later. It's looking likely, though, that there will just be one candidate, and there are suggestions, of course, that that leadership contest will be truncated, or at least the move to a new Prime Minister will be truncated. His successor will be Britain's 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. We'll have political reaction here in Downing Street and across the country. But first, let's take a listen to that resignation speech from the outgoing Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Walking up this street 2 years ago was the proudest moment of my life. A new Labour government, the first in 14 years. A page in our country's history turned after years of disappointment and despair. The chance to change the lives of millions of people for the better. That's what I came into politics for. The journey to that point was not easy. 6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt. I was told time and time again that my party was finished, that we were consigned to history, that a majority at the general election, let alone a landslide majority, was impossible. But we proved those people wrong because we changed our party, ripping out the poison of anti-Semitism, restoring trust on the economy, defence and national security, and becoming a party that once again stood proudly with, not against, our national flag. The hard work of change was with a singular purpose, not power for power's sake, but to change Britain for the better, to build a fairer country with dignity and respect, where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, wealth and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few.
Let's take you live to the House of Commons, and Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader, is speaking.
The few Labour MPs who bothered to turn up were nodding along, pretending to be listening intently, but in a few minutes they will all scurry back to their offices and focus on their real priority, lobbying for jobs in the next government. So can I take the opportunity to congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield on his election, Mr Speaker, but can I just point out that the new member for Aberdeen South is here. He is here. The member for Makerfield is not here, because he is more interested in his leadership bid than Britain's national security. 2 weeks ago, the Defence Secretary and Armed Forces Minister as well quit the government because Labour's failure to fund defence is putting our national security at risk. This will not disappear from the member for Makerfield's in tray just because he won a by-election. If he becomes Prime Minister, he will be briefed by the heads of our military about Britain's reducing ability to defend herself, let alone Ukraine, as the Deputy Prime Minister said. In order to fund defence, we need more money, not more speeches at summits. He will find that Britain is not able to borrow any more money. He will find that it has all been spent on welfare. He will realise that this government is providing export finance to rebuild Ukraine's energy system while crippling our own, reducing sanctions on Russian oil while sanctioning oil from Aberdeen. Only one thing matters at the G7 and NATO summits, Mr Speaker, and that is our collective national security. Let me, sorry, the Minister is chuntering. Can he say anything about why the Defence Secretary resigned? If they're all living in La La Land, I'm going to wake them up. I'm going to wake them up. Should stop pretending that everything is fine, because it is not. Let me remind him, Mr Speaker, that the Prime Minister is resigning because he failed on national security. He appointed a known security risk as our ambassador to Washington. He is destroying our energy security, which is national security, and he is refusing to fund the defence investment plan needed to keep our country safe. The G7 summit reminds us, Mr Speaker, that we are living in serious times, yet the government is paralysed and our country is in limbo. It is time for Labour to start putting country before party and to put Britain's national interest first.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, this is the first occasion I've been opposite the Leader of the Opposition, and can I thank her? We're actually friends behind all of this, but can I thank her for her generosity and constructive suggestions on this occasion. It's always good to know that I can count on her support. But can I remind the House that this is the same leader of the opposition who previously suggested that we should empty chair the G20, that we should not bother turning up at the NATO summit, and she wanted to jump into war with Iran without thinking through the consequences. I'm proud to serve a Prime Minister whose hard work has made this country stronger and much fairer than the Britain we inherited from the party opposite. She knows that the Prime Minister has rebuilt Britain's international alliances. She can't deny the 5 major trade deals that we struck under our watch that she failed to do. She knows that we've led the coalition of the willing to back Ukraine. We've renewed our partnership with Europe. We're delivering the biggest boost to defence spending since the Cold War. I'm proud of all of that. Now, she asks about defence. The work continues to finalise the defence investment plan. We're already investing £270 billion over this Parliament. The Defence Investment Plan will deliver another unprecedented increase in defence spending. And when it's published shortly, we will set out every government department is contributing to defence. She talks about oil and gas. Oil and gas will be part of our energy mix for many years to come, delivering enough clean energy products to power 23 million homes, led by Great British Energy, headquartered in Aberdeen, of course. Headquartered in Aberdeen. The PM secured £9 billion worth of Japanese investment in offshore wind last weekend. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition would rip that all up. She talks about Russian oil. The party opposite is wrong about Russian oil. All sanctions on Russian oil remains in place. We're imposing new sanctions that's ever existed under the party opposite. I look forward to another opportunity to sit across from the Leader of the Opposition in the months ahead.
David Lammy there, the Deputy Prime Minister, updating the House on his G7 summit that he attended last week alongside the Prime Minister, of course. Well, we can go now back to Downing Street and we can speak to Newsnight's political editor, Nick Watt. Hi, Nick. Just quickly, I wanted to pick on something that we heard there from Kemi Badenoch, making the point that Andy Burnham isn't actually in the House. He may be an MP, but she said he's more interested in his leadership bid than Britain's security. And that is going to be an accusation that he does face unless he comes up with an outline of what his policies, if he becomes Prime Minister, will be.
Well, that's right. We had obviously Andy Burnham being sworn in, so he's now officially the Labour MP for Makerfield. But then he left the chamber, which is sort of the tradition, and obviously had the picture taken with lots of Labour MPs. There was the rather formal picture where they all looked a bit stiff. And then Andy Burnham, because this is the Andy Burnham way, the King of the North, there were the selfies and looking much more relaxed. And you're sort of thinking, well, that's a bit of a contrast, isn't it, for when Keir Starmer does these things. But as you're saying, there's Kemi Badenoch, Leader of the Opposition, thought she'd be facing the man who represented the UK at the G7 summit, who goes by the name of Sir Keir Starmer, but he obviously wasn't there. Bit of a dramatic day. And David Lammy was standing in, and obviously Kemi Badenoch making the point in statements earlier today, is Keir Starmer a fully functioning Prime Minister if he can't do these sorts of statements? But David Lammy, obviously a former Foreign Secretary, so if he needs to talk about Iran, if he needs to talk about Ukraine, and he needs to talk about the wider Middle East, well, David Lammy can do that standing on his head because he is a former Foreign Secretary. But Samantha, I do say that we're standing here in Downing Street, obviously talking about the UK and what's been going on in this street earlier today. And I'm joined now by Emma Burnell, who is the editor of Labour List. And if you want to know what's going on in the Labour Party, you turn to Labour List.
Absolutely.
So Emma Burnell, what's going on in the Labour Party? Is it a coronation?
It's starting to look like there isn't going to be a contest when Wes Streeting, who was really the only other likely real challenger, the likely other real challenger who could possibly have got the MP votes that he'd need to run, said, no, this is silly, I'm Team Andy, let's just all get together. That was when it was really clear that we're probably heading for a fairly smooth transition.
Because there was some speculation. Would Ed Miliband want to stand? Would Yvette Cooper want to stand? Would John Healey want to stand? Are you saying if Wes Streeting saying I'm not standing, then nobody apart from Andy Burnham standing?
I think certainly most of the names that you mentioned then, they were being talked about before Makerfield. If Andy hadn't won in Makerfield, and certainly if he hadn't won so decisively in Makerfield, we might be in a different world. That's not the world we live in now. Having both increased the majority of that seat, won very hands down, and being the person who, let's face it, a lot of Labour eggs were in that basket, that meant that there was really only going to be one contender from the part of the party that stretches from the hard left to the sort of middling soft left. Wes was thinking about running. He's more from the centrist wing of the party, but I think he just realised that it would only go one way in a contest, and he could do better for the party by sort of saying, hey, let's work together, rather than let's have a big old Barney.
I mean, it's interesting you're talking about the soft left and you're talking about the middling left. In other words, you, editor of Labour List, you know this tribe, you know this family. What is your instinct? Do you think Wes Streeting is going to want to have a big tent, a broad church? Is he going to want to bring all wings of this party into his government?
But I think you mean
Andy Burnham. What a mistake. Andy Burnham. It's over for Wes Streeting for the moment. Andy Burnham. Do you think he'll want to have a broad church?
I think he's kind of going to have to, for two reasons. First of all, if he is elected without a contest, then I think that that's coming off the back of goodwill from people across the party. And that then needs to be carried forward, because I think part of the problem that Keir Starmer has had is that he hasn't built those relationships with his fellow parliamentarians. I think the other reason, to be quite honest, is that a lot of the people who Andy has been very, very close to have made quite a big deal about ending factionalism. And that's really easy to say when your faction isn't in charge, but he's going to have to model that from the top.
Now, we're in Downing Street. Obviously, number 10 is over there, but there's a very significant door just behind us. So we have a reasonable chance who's going to be going through the door of number 10. But I'm now going to put you on the spot. If Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, who's going to go through the door of number 11? Who's going to be his Chancellor?
I honestly don't know. I think it's a really complicated decision. There are people who will tell you that it needs to be Rachel Reeves for continuity. There will people who will tell you it needs to be Ed Miliband because they're probably closest in terms of economic ideas. There'll be other people who will say you can't spook the markets. Ed Miliband will spook the markets. I think the markets have had a fairly subdued reaction to today's news, and that might be giving people on the left a bit more confidence. But honestly, I don't know that Andy's made that decision yet, so I certainly couldn't tell you.
Because the Chancellor, appointing the Chancellor is, you know your Labour history, is the most important job. Blair Brown, Gordon Brown, Alistair Darling, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, it really matters. But it's often a very difficult relationship, isn't it?
It can be and each of those relationships had their own tensions, but for very different reasons. So there's not one set of reasons why. I mean, with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, it was like they both wanted the top job eventually. I think with Andy coming in pretty fresh, pretty young, that whoever he appoints will not be kind of expected to have done some random deal in a restaurant 20 years ago and then forever be expecting to be yapping at his heels. But they are intricately entwined. You just have to look at, if a Chancellor goes, the PM goes. And the same is often true the other way round.
Now, Christian showed me the picture of all those Labour MPs with...
I was in the hall.
You were there with Andy Burnham, and he very, very cheekily, I would say, put me on the spot and said, who's the most significant one there in an Andy Burnham sort of administration in a team? And my eyesight's not great, but the person who stood out was Lucy Powell, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Greater Manchester MP. What do you think of that?
Well, the thing about Lucy Powell is she has her own mandate. Her job is not connected to Andy Burnham's at all. She is the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party as long as she wants to be Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. She's got her own mandate, she's got her own space in the party. But she's also very, very close to Andy Burnham. And so I think she will be a real mover, shaker, power broker. Whether she goes into the cabinet or not, it may be that she wants to focus on the party role that she was elected to without also having a very, very difficult brief as a cabinet minister. We should wait and see.
Well, Emma, I'm going to say a really big thank you to you. And Samantha, I told you that if you really want to know the intricacies of the Labour Party, you go to Emma Burnell at Labour List, and there you are. What a great expert.
Nick, thank you very much. Well, this is the latest chapter of instability in Downing Street. Sir Keir Starmer has become the 6th Prime Minister to resign in the past decade. Let's take a look at the leaders that have come and gone in that time.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
I leave this job honoured to have been your Prime Minister. This is the best country in the world, and it is thanks entirely to you, the British people.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
Well, let's take a closer look at Andy Burnham, the man who will stand to replace Keir Starmer as the next Prime Minister. Here's our correspondent Lauren Moss.
Arriving in London, Andy Burnham was the centre of attention, which is where he'll likely stay as he officially becomes an MP once again.
Mr Burnham, you're live on BBC News. What's your reaction to the Prime Minister's resignation?
I made my statement, obviously praising the Prime Minister's dedication, service, and confirm that I will put myself forward in the process that will soon be underway.
When Rishi Sunak did that and he became Prime Minister, you called for a general election. Would you be looking to do the same?
I think you're jumping several hurdles ahead there. My priority today is to become sworn in as the Mayor, as the MP for Makerfield, and it's been very kind of sad for me today to leave Greater Manchester. The people have been brilliant to me over the last few years. I've loved every minute of the role. I hope I leave Manchester in a better place, but thanks very much. Thank you.
The now former Mayor of Greater Manchester has made his ambitions no secret.
We have an opportunity to turn the tide, to make the country feel like it's working again, to make people see that politics can make a positive difference.
And with an opening for the top job appearing this summer, will he be the one to replace Sir Keir Starmer? Andy Burnham is no stranger to Westminster. It's 25 years since he first became an MP under Tony Blair's Labour government, with some familiar sentiment.
I grew up in this area and I know it well, I know the people well, and my primary job is to serve the people of Leigh to the best of my abilities.
He served in the Cabinet and in 2009 as Culture Secretary was heckled by crowds at Liverpool's Anfield Stadium on the 20th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster, prompting him to call for an independent inquiry. Later, he became Health Secretary before Labour lost the general election to the Conservatives. He vied for the leadership twice, coming in fourth on his first attempt and losing to Jeremy Corbyn on his second.
And you're having yet another crack at the leadership.
Yeah, last time.
I
won't be doing it again. For me, this is, it's now or never.
Right,
really,
right.
Famous last words. He left London politics, though, becoming Mayor of Greater Manchester, a position he held for 9 years, and didn't shy away from views that areas outside the South East are often overlooked.
There's a snobbery, and I don't know. It's just the people in this building live largely within the M25.
He was prevented from running in this February's by-election in Gorton and Denton, but when another was triggered in Makerfield, the path appeared to be clear and he beat closest competitor Reform by 9,000 votes. But what do the people he's worked for nearly a decade make of it all?
I just hope that he can transport what he's done in Manchester and the way that he feels about Manchester into Westminster.
I'm a big Andy Burnham fan and have been for a long time. I just hope he doesn't disappoint everyone.
He needs to be more out there. I mean, Keir Starmer's been very timid. You know, I think Andy needs to, if he wants to do well, he needs to stand up to the media a lot more. He needs to actually put out a message a lot more, drive a story a lot more.
With this new chapter in Andy Burnham's career could come a new chapter for the Labour Party, and with it, UK politics. Lauren Moss, BBC News.
Well, joining me now is Neil Lawson, director of the centre-left pressure group Compass, who is close to Andy Burnham. Neil, welcome to you. Good to have you with us. It looks like it may just be a coronation. Is that what you want? Is that what Andy Burnham wants?
Look, I think it's always better when politicians or any leaders are tested through interview processes or through democratic elections. But that's not in Andy's gift or anyone else's gift. It's up to, you know, someone to put their name forward and get the required number of MP nominations. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. Look, the thing about Burnham is that he's always had the popularity and the plan, you know, and the personality, and it's put him so far ahead of everyone else in the field consistently in the Labour Party for such a long time.
But it hasn't, because he's tried to be leader before and failed.
Well, what I meant since, you know, 2015, where he's really developed and flourished as a politician, obviously in Greater Manchester, where he's proved his worth, you know, and become, you know, a much more developed kind of politician and leader. And all the polls in and around the Labour Party for a long time have said that he is by far and away the most popular. So I don't think that anyone is going to chance their arm and probably, you know, expose how little support they've got compared to how much support Andy Burnham's got. So I doubt if there will be a contest.
OK, so he may be popular in the party, but he's going to have to prove his worth to the electorate, to the people of Britain. What is he going to be able to do differently to what Keir Starmer has done, how he's run the country for the past 2 years, to put Labour in a stronger position with the electorate?
Yeah, I think there's two things, really. There is firstly this personality, and that matters a lot in modern politics. You can write it off as vibes if you want. But Andy has a kind of, you know, a way about him, you know, which is genuine in the sense that he likes talking to people, he likes meeting people, he enjoys his job, he looks and feels positive about what he's doing, and that matters, and he's clearly got that. But the second thing is that he's got a plan, you know, that he's been trialling this in Greater Manchester, the way in which you do politics differently in order to do economics differently. You build a big long-term consensus to give both the state and the private sector business the confidence to invest in areas, and you get growth and you spread that growth out and it works. And he's done that consistently, you know, within Greater Manchester, the fastest growing economy in the country, the wealth trickling out, not just from the tower blocks in the middle of Manchester, but out to places, and increasingly trying to make sure that places like Makerfield that he now represents feel the benefits of that growth. If he does that in the country and puts together a personality with that kind of plan, then the Labour Party has a chance of reinventing itself and becoming popular again before the next election.
Running a city, of course, very different to running a country, with all the different challenges it faces, not least internationally and with foreign leaders, our relationship with the United States being a key issue here. And that's something that Keir Starmer has seen generally to have managed quite well. Yes, there's been ups and downs, but generally he has had Donald Trump on side. Is Andy Burnham going to get Donald Trump on side?
Well, the first point is that there is no perfect training ground to become a prime minister for all the reasons that you say in terms of the challenges. But actually, the consensus view is that being a combined authority mayor is one of the best training grounds, because it's about how you build these big coalitions, how you lead people, etc. So he's trained in a lot of it. Now, clearly, he has to get on top of foreign policy issues, but there's a lot of experts around. There's Jonathan Powell, who's there now, and actually, do we want a prime minister that spends all their time abroad and all their time on foreign affairs? That's what the foreign secretary is supposed to do. So I think he should appoint a foreign secretary who's on top of those issues. Of course, that's down to the prime minister as well. But I think Andy will be focused on the domestic agenda and changing people's lives in the country first.
Neil, who do you think he should be assigning the top jobs to, especially the chancellorship? Is he going to keep Rachel Reeves?
Well, I don't know, and I've not had those conversations with him.
Do you think he should?
I think across the piece, he should appoint the people who he thinks is best placed to do the job. Not a question of party political management, but who can do the job. In terms of the chancellorship, I think there's one standout candidate who's worked in the Treasury, who understands the Treasury, who's delivered in the job that they've done so far, and that is Ed Miliband.
But he does have to keep all the party on side because, as we've seen, Keir Starmer hasn't been able to, and it's all fallen apart for him.
Well, I mean, one of Keir's failings was he worked from a very, very narrow factional base within the party.
Okay.
Andy Burnham doesn't work like that. He's very consensual. He's very collegiate. He'll bring people in and build a much more team spirit, I think.
We are out of time. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Well, Andy Burnham has been sworn in as the MP for Makerfield just hours after Keir Starmer announced his resignation as Labour Party leader. Stay with us for all of the latest developments here on BBC News.